Hi everyone and welcome to this video called Khazard. It's the second video I've made designed to share some of the decks I built for the Lord of the Rings living card game with you. As mentioned, it's probably no surprise this is a dwarf themed deck that I'm going to run through today. Again, this deck is made of 50 cards and unless I say otherwise, there's usually 3 copies of each card in there. I'm only using one core set, I've only ever purchased one, and every adventure pack up and to including the Long Dark. So let's make a start. Let's first of all have a look at the heroes and then I'll take you through the actual cards in the deck. So the first guy here we've got is Dain Ironfoot. He's 11 threat, starting threat, 1 questing power, 2 attack, 3 defense, 5 hit points. It's a pretty good number of hit points there. This guy is insanely powerful, and if you're thinking about building a dwarf deck, you'd be mad not to include him. It's almost a given. He's just that good. It's almost game changing as a card when he came out. I think sort of changed the power of the dwarf deck and actually made it a viable deck type to play. So the power here is while Dain is ready, all dwarf characters get +1 attack and +1 questing. Now this is a massive effect, so it's any dwarf characters on the table, not just the ones you control. So if you're playing 2-player, 3-player, and your sort of fellow players have got some dwarves out there as well, they're going to benefit from this +1 attack and +1 questing. This can just get insane, especially obviously in a deck which is made up mostly of dwarves. You can end up adding huge amounts to your questing and your attack. So this guy's pretty amazing. Obviously, the only caveat there is you need to make sure that he's always ready, so it does limit him a little bit. But with 1 questing, he tends to avoid the quest phase anyway. He's not the best quester, so you're often better off just leaving him ready so that he gives that extra 1 willpower to the other dwarves. But absolutely insanely powerful leadership hero there, and should be in a dwarf deck. I can't think of any reason not to put him in a dwarf deck. He's that good. Okay, so our second hero, moving on, is Beaver here. Now he's a lore hero with 2 questing, so slightly better than Dain, 1 attack, 2 defense, and only 3 hit points. And he's reading his book there. He looks very sort of engrossed in his reading there. I don't know if he's actually ready to go on a quest. Hopefully he's reading something about where to go on the quest and puts the book down actually when a massive orc comes along. But Beaver has an action of paying 1 resource from a hero's resource pool to add that resource to Beaver's resource, to add 1 resource to Beaver's resource pool, and any player can trigger this ability. Sounds pretty minor as an ability, but in this deck actually very useful and something I use probably nearly every round. A lot of the dwarves in this deck are lore dwarves. Some of them have abilities that are triggered by paying a lore resource, as we're going to see. This is a really, really useful ability, and it can get us out of some pretty tight situations where we say got just 1 short of playing a lore card. We can just take that from one of the other characters and put it onto Beaver. Again, he's quite good for questing. Unlike Dain, you probably want to use him for questing. He's going to be questing for 3 if Dain is in play, so that actually adds some value to him and can contribute his attack during the attack phase if you're finding you need an extra 2 attack power. Again, with Dain ready to be up to 2. So very good hero again. So Beaver there. Our last hero here is good old Gimli. Going back to the core set here. This is again a very good dwarf card to put in. We've got 2 questing, 2 attack, 2 defense, 5 hit points, and his ability, which is probably one of the best hero abilities in the game. When he takes damage, he can do an extra point of damage to an enemy for each damage token on him at that time. So very, very useful card. As he takes damage, he gets stronger. Funnily enough, in this deck, there's not too much need to use him for attacking. There's other ways of dealing with threats, sort of enemies in this deck that are quite effective, and you'll probably find with Dain in play and a lot of dwarves in play, you'll end up with a whole army of dwarves ready to sort of clobber anything that gets too close to you, and they can do massive attacks. Sort of dwarf power, dwarf army goes forth and kills anything you want really. But it's good to have that extra attack power there for Gimli. And more observant of you would have noticed this is a tri-sphere deck, so we're actually playing 3 different spheres. We've got lore, leadership and tactics. Now that takes a little bit more skill perhaps. It's perhaps not most beginner friendly deck. Beginners might want to start with monosphere, but this deck is perhaps designed for someone a little bit more advanced who wants to play tri-sphere. Does take a bit of management of resources, but as we'll see, there are things in the deck to make that a little bit easier, so we can actually get some value out of the cards. One tip for any tri-sphere deck, I think, is just to make sure you don't put too many cards in that of high value. So in this for a deck with tri-sphere like this, you don't want to have sort of 5 cost cards that you're going to be playing with hand. They're in, say, a tactic sphere. So it's best to sub those out for the lower cost cards that you're more likely to get out. So let's have a look at the actual cards. So our first card actually in the deck is the Longbeard Mapmaker. Again, doesn't look particularly ready for action from the art. Looks like he's in the same library as Beaver, writing a map there. Hopefully he'll put that down and actually sort of pick up a sword or something useful as they get on the quest. Or perhaps he just takes the entire study with him and table and drags it along behind him as they walk on the road. So he's cost of 3, he has 1 questing, 1 attack, 1 defence, and 3 hit points. Oddly, this guy actually, although he seems like a sort of more of a questing character, the number of hit points he has is actually quite useful, and it's quite possible to use him as sort of a chump blocker or a blocker just to block, just to stop an attack. And oddly, he often survives. He often comes out of it alive because of that 3 hit points. So unless something's hitting you for 4 or more, he's going to come out of that alive, which is, for the dwarves, and certainly the dwarves that are not combat orientated, is a little bit unusual. So it's quite a nice extra bonus there. But his ability is what's really useful in this deck. So we can spend 1 lore resource to give him +1 questing. Now this is completely optional. So after you've committed to the quest, you can either trigger this before you reveal cards off the encounter deck. You can actually even wait until you've seen the cards off the encounter deck. There is a window after the cards have been revealed. So if you're playing a 2-player game, you have to wait till 2 cards are revealed. So once all the cards have been revealed, there is an action window there, so you can trigger this ability then. So if you find you're 2 short for the quest, you're only breaking even, or that you're going to be 1 short, it's a good time to trigger this ability, pay that 1 lore resource, and pump him up a bit. Very good way of mopping up spare lore resources as well later in the game, just for 1 final push. If you've accumulated them on Beaver, you can just spend those lore resources there. Really handy, useful guy to have in the deck. And again with Dane, of course, we're talking about a 2 quester there. So that's our first ally. Moving on here to another ally, a tactics ally this time. We've got the Erebor Battlemaster. Insanely good card, probably one of the best dwarf cards, if not the best dwarf ally out there. This guy just, again, is a game changer in the amount of attack power he has. And this is why I'm saying usually Gimli can just sit back and take it easy. Probably sit and read the book that Beaver's reading as well. But this guy, very, very good card. So he's free, cost of 3. Can be a little bit struggle to get in this deck. You just have to save up those tactics resources, but it's worth waiting 2 or 3 turns before you play it. It's that good. We've got 1 attack, 1 defence, and the power here, which is just insane, it gets +1 attack for each other dwarf character that you control. So this is just in your deck this time, not on the table. Just insane power. And obviously, if you've geared up your deck to contain nothing but dwarves, it's a no-brainer that this guy's going to get very powerful very quickly. He's, if anyone's played Magic the Gathering, a bit like the Lord cards in Magic the Gathering that sort of feed off each other. So if you have another one of these on the table, that counts as another dwarf, and it's going to add attack power to him. Absolute game-changing card. With Dane in play, he comes onto the table. Usually, if you've got 3 dwarf heroes in play already, he's +3 already, because it's dwarf characters, which includes heroes. If you then have Dane ready, he's then +4. So he's already 5 when he hits the table, which is just incredibly powerful. And as you play more dwarves, it's going to get more and more powerful throughout the game. Worth keeping on the table. Wouldn't use him to defend with, just keep him there to hit back at things, but can take out, I mean, just that massive axe there, I mean, it can just sort of kill a troll. If you get him powerful enough, he can just chop the head off a troll very easily. And it's a game-winning card, and if you can protect it, it takes perhaps a bit weak early in the game when you need things to defend, but as the game goes on, you're going to find this guy just gets insanely powerful. One of the best dwarf cards yet to come out, definitely worth getting that adventure pack. I can't remember what adventure pack that is, I think it's probably the Long Dark. It's definitely one worth picking up if you're looking to build a dwarf deck. Actually, all this cycle, since Khazad, is definitely worth picking up for dwarves. Obviously, as the name of the cycle suggests, there's some very, very good dwarf cards in there. Our next ally here is the Erebor Record Keeper. It's a lore ally. Nice cheap cost of 1, which means it's one that you have in your hand at the start. You're going to be able to get it out, and he's going to be able to help you straight away. Again, 1 questing, 2 questing with Dane. No attack, no defence, and as we'll see, he can't actually participate in the combat phase anyway. 1 hit point, so he's pretty vulnerable to any treachery cards that come off the deck that say, deal 1 damage to each ally. The ability Record Keeper cannot attack or defend. This makes more sense, I guess. Again, he's in the library here, he doesn't have the ability to fight. The action, exhaust him and pay 1 tactics resource to choose and ready a dwarf character. That can be quite useful if you want to. So you can ready your Erebor Battlemaster again. You can also ready one of your heroes so they can take part later and defend. This can be quite useful. It's something I perhaps would use once or twice a game. This deck doesn't tend to be flooded with lore resources, but it's a useful ability if you can get that out. To be honest, this is a good card to have in your hand early in the game because you then have 2 questing resources right off the bat, and you can actually start questing for a lot of questing power there. And next up we have the Longbeard Orcslayer. I've actually only got 2 copies in here because, again, as I've said, I've only ever purchased 1 core set, not wishing to sort of buy endless copies of the core set when I could get adventure packs. But this guy works quite well in this deck. He's a Dwarf Warrior, 4 leadership, resources, 0 questing, but again, Dane does benefit characters who have 0 quest ability, so he ends up with 1 questing, 2 attack, 1 defense, and 3 hit points. 2 copies of this is enough. The cost is quite high, especially considering we're playing mono sphere. But if you can get him out late towards the game, it can actually help, especially as a lot of these quests have orcs in, dealing 1 damage to each orc in play in some of the things like the Long Dark and the other one, which the name escapes me, the other one, Into the Pit, from the core set, the Khazad expansion. A lot of those, pretty much all of those have orcs in play, so he's going to be able to do some damage to the orcs in play there. So just 2 copies of that, just for late game. Probably early game, you're not going to have the resources to play it. One you will have the resources to play though, a lot earlier, is the Miner of the Iron Hills. From the core set here, most people will be familiar with this. He's a 2 resource cost card. No questing it, but again, the thing with the 0 quests is they become useful with Dane because they end up having a quest point, so you can have a whole army of dwarves contributing something to the quest. 1 attack, 1 defense, and 2 hit points. And we've got the response, after he enters play, you can choose and discard 1 condition attachment from play. Really odd ability, and it's not many other cards that can do this. It's very useful even now, despite the expansions that come out, despite the adventure packs. There's nothing really that's replaced the sort of value of that ability, be able to discard a condition from play. And certainly thinking of things that have come up recently, conditions that are attached. I think the sort of Rivendell quest, the Road to Rivendell, and what's the one before that, the Redhorn Gate, have some pretty nasty attachments in there. So Freezing Cold springs to mind, where it gets attached to your hero and they lose 2 willpower and can't do very much, and they can't commit to exhaust to a quest. And then of course at the end of Redhorn Gate you end up with that double whammy where if anyone's ever got 0 willpower, they're dead, which is something to actually think about in this deck, because obviously a lot of the characters have only 1 willpower from Dane, which does save them, does actually help in that quest. So yeah, really useful card. That condition ability, I wouldn't recommend. I don't always keep the card in my hand waiting for that to come out, but if you can keep the card in your hand, it's going to help you get rid of some nasty conditions there, which you can then just discard from play. So useful ability. We've not seen anything else that can achieve that effect so far. Okay, Khazad, our next card. So absolutely insanely good card again. As a lot of these dwarf cards seem to be incredibly hesitate to say overpowered, but do seem to be sort of some of the more powerful cards, certainly in the game at the moment. So we've got the good artwork. I like the artwork there. You've got the dwarf who's about to sort of pummel on the head quite sort of heavily with what looks like some kind of stone hammer. It does look a bit dark where they are. There's a bit of light behind him, but the orc's not going to be too well in a minute. So it costs 0, which is amazing getting it for free, essentially, as long as you've got your tactics hero, which we have, so we can play as for free. And the action is to choose a dwarf hero. Until the end of the phase, that character gets +3. Choose a dwarf character, sorry. The differentiation is important there. Character, as everyone probably knows, means allies and heroes. Allies are the cards marked in ally with ally. Like, for example, our Miner of the Iron Hills is an ally. And heroes are heroes, but character means allies and heroes. So we can play this on any of our allies in play. For example, our Erebor Battlemaster, we've already seen, who is insanely powerful, can get even more ridiculously overpowered and just sort of smash a dwarf completely, smash the enemy completely out of the arena. So pretty good card, and definitely again one you want to include in a dwarf deck, and the cost of 0 just makes it too good to leave out there. So that's one of our tactics events. Looking now at another event, this time a lore sphere event. We've got Ancestral Knowledge. Very low cost of 1, very good cost. Again, in our triple monosphere deck, we're going to want. I keep saying monosphere, actually I mean triple sphere, don't I? Triple sphere, where we've got 3 different spheres. So the action is to exhaust a dwarf to place 2 progress tokens on the active location. But the important thing here is we can put 4 if it's an underground or a mounting location. Now, in this cycle, in the Dwarven cycle, obviously we've got a lot of underground and mountain locations. In fact, almost all the locations will fall into that category of being either underground, so things like Into the Pit or the Long Dark will have a lot of underground. And the Redhorn Gate and Return to Rivendell are going to be mostly mounting. So we've got Karagas and all the other mountain locations there. Very, very good card, and actually can help a lot of things like the Redhorn Gate. You can put 4 progress tokens on a mountain location. Just important to note that it is the active location. I was playing this wrong for a period of time. You can't put it on things in the staging area. So you just exhaust a dwarf. You can choose one of the less useful dwarfs, perhaps one of the ones that's only going to contribute 1 to the quest. So exhaust that dwarf and you get to put 4 massive progress tokens on the mountain. It can clear locations very, very quickly. Very handy event, and it will cost a 1, pretty cheap to play as well. Our next card is a leadership event. Cost of 3 is a little bit steeper, one you might have to save up for a few turns to play. But we've got an action here, ready all dwarf characters. The card name is Lure of Moria. This is from one of the more recent sets. Again, I think this is probably might be the Long Dark. Someone, correct me if I'm wrong, post in the comments. But we've got Lure of Moria here. Pretty good, we can ready all dwarf characters. Funnily enough, this deck contains quite a lot of dwarf characters. It's a massive coincidence there. So we can ready all those, and then we're ready to quest again. So after the quest phase, we can ready them all. We then have an army that can then go forth and smash the enemy, or can be used to defend. So pretty handy card. Similar to the Rohan deck, I'll go through at some point as well, where we've got the deck that benefits all Rohan characters, adds questing power. I think there's also a Rohan card. I think Airman, when he leaves play, will ready all Rohan characters. So we're starting to see a lot of cards in the game which sort of benefit a particular type of character. And it's this card again that sort of brings together that dwarf synergy and brings together the idea of the dwarf deck. But pretty good card. I've actually found it pretty handy when I've been playing this deck. Towards the end you can get a final push out if you want to just ready all your dwarves. But pretty good card. So I have 3 copies of that as well. Our next event is again the leadership. Again, one of the best cards in the set, and definitely should be in your dwarf deck. Durin Song, really nice piece of artwork there. We've got an empty throne with a light source coming behind it. I don't know quite where Durin is, presumably either dead or not at home at the moment. I'm sure we can leave a message. He's not on his throne just at the second. But the important thing is it's a song. So, and the action here, choose a dwarf hero. Again, important to note it's a hero, it's not a character this time. This has to be played in a hero. The hero gets +2 questing, +2 attack, and +2 defense. Very nice, very, very, very cheap effect for the cost. Gives us 2 questing and 2 attack, which usually that's what I find I use it for the extra 2 questing and the extra 2 attack. One nice combo here actually, we saw the guy who can, I'm just going to find him here, ready the Erebor Record Keeper can ready a dwarf character. What we can do here is if we play this say on Gimli, we can get +2 questing. We can then ready Gimli using the Erebor Record Keeper, and then we can then attack as well. So we can actually get a character sort of do dual function for that round. They can take part in 2 of the phases, and that way we get more value out of this card rather than just saying we're going to use it for questing. Moving on, Legacy of Durin, another absolutely brilliant card. Again, I think probably in the Long Dark, costs 1. It's a lore card. We attach it to a dwarf hero. Every time we then play a dwarf character, we get to draw a card. Absolutely astonishingly good card again. Get it onto your heroes early in the game. I'd actually suggest trying to get this in your opening hand if you can mulligan. Either take your mulligan if you don't get it. Really very, very good card, and actually because there's so many dwarves here, it's not unusual to get 2 or 3 out per round. Certainly sort of by mid-game, you're going to be drawing a lot of cards, which is what you want. And I've actually got almost to the end of my deck by drawing. The only drawback of this card I find is in the latest quest there's a lot of cards that will make you discard attachments. So I think it's either probably the red Return to Rivendell has a Orc type that makes you discard 2 attachments. So not so good. So you might just want to keep a spare copy in your hand. I did find out to reapply this. And it's obvious that the developers are getting sort of very aggressive against attachments. There's a lot of cards now that will make you discard. And I know there's a lot of excitement around the latest previews looking at sort of the attachments, some of the new Glorfindel hero and some of the attachments around that. So things like his horse. His name I can't pronounce, but it's Athaloth, I think. It's my best pronunciation. But a lot of excitement around that. But again, it has to be just remember that there's a lot of things that now can get rid of attachments. And I think it's a trend we're going to keep seeing on the encounter deck, the things that can sort of anti-attachments. So just be aware of that. Again, really nice artwork on that card as well. I've then got a couple of copies of Ringmail. I used to use the Citadel Plate, which was 4. Has a much stronger effect, obviously, Citadel Plate. This is a much sort of cheaper, it's like a light version of that, a cheaper sort of bargain basement version. Cost 2, can go on a dwarf or a hobbit, and the character gets +1 hit point and +1 defense. Not the most brilliant card in the world, but unlike Citadel Plate, we can actually place on a character. So remember that includes allies. We can put it on the character we just want to use to defend. We can also put it on our Erebor our Battle Master, Dwarf Battle Master, to give him an extra bit of defence. Really nice card. It can just help keep one of your allies alive for a little bit longer. So nice card there, and much easier to get out on Citadel Plate. I was finding that Citadel Plate I wasn't playing very often because it's just a very hard card to get out because of the cost. Speaking of attachments, I also have the boots from Erebor. I've just put it into a nice cheap cost card. You get a nice benefit from it. It can go on a dwarf. It costs 0. It's a neutral attachment, and there's only you can have 1 per character. There's a limit there, so they've only got 2 feet, even though they're dwarves. In case you were thinking of attaching multiple copies. Although unusually you can have 2 copies of a Citadel Plate or 2 copies of armour, which all seems a bit odd. Although I tend to think of it as reinforcing the armour, so probably like Diablo style, where you combine 2 of the same item to make it stronger. But you can't do that with the boots, it seems. The character just gets +1 hit point. Not the most stunning effect, but again, it's a character, so we can use this on allies. Combined with the Ringmail, you can add a couple of hit points to a very fragile ally, which can be quite good. Can just help keep them alive a little bit longer. Moving swiftly on, we have the Erebor Hammersmith. Again, a dwarf, nice cheap dwarf, too good to not put in, given we've got all these dwarf triggering effects. So we can draw a card. We had our what's the name of the card? Forgotten that. Legacy of Durin in play, which we saw a little bit earlier. Just show you that again. So that gives us a card every time we play a dwarf. So also have another effect here. So cost of 2 for 1 questing, 1 attack, 1 defence. Again, we'll benefit from Dane. I keep saying that, but remember that all these dwarfs get +1 questing. After we play him, we can return an attachment from our discard pile. Again, recently said in the quest, because there's so many things that now seem to discard attachments, I've actually used this a few times to get an attachment back. So we can get back some of our attachments there. So it's more useful than it used to be. Previously than that, I don't think you'd ever have an attachment really in your discard pile for any particular reason. So really nice guy there to play, really good ally. We then got a couple of things just to help with, because we're playing Trisphere here, so 3 different spheres, just a couple of things to help with the resource management. We've got firstly Navi's Belt. Card some people love, some people hate. I think it really is quite useful, especially in this sort of triple sphere here. We've got cost of 2, and we attach it to a dwarf hero. We can then exhaust it to give that a resource icon of your choice until the end of phase. So it just adds it gives a bit more flexibility. So if you've got a big pool of resources sitting in your tactics hero, you can exhaust this and then change them into lore, which is actually quite helpful, especially when we can use those resources then for things like the map maker. It just gives a nice bit of flexibility to even out the distribution of resources. So I have 3 copies of that as well. And our old favourite here, the Steward of Gondor. So we can attach that to a hero. You can attach it. You can exhaust it the minute you've attached it. So you attach it in the planning phase, then exhaust it to get the benefit straight away. So you get back those 2 resources. Insanely good card, and you're going to end up probably buying games. Anyone uses this now, you're going to end up with probably more resources than you can use. And again, Navi's Belt combos quite well with that, because we can then reappropriate those resources to use them for something we actually want to use there. Again, the Steward seems to not be at home. Obviously, Fantasy Flight don't know how to draw people on thrones. I'm beginning to see a theme here, but we do have a sceptre and what looks like a sort of cloak draped over the throne. And doesn't seem to be many people actually in the shop. But obviously being Steward of Gondor is a very sort of busy profession. You're never actually at home. Okay, coming towards the end of the deck here. Just one more very quick card. Our Veteran Axe Hand. Tactics ally from the core set. Good old reliable Veteran Axe Hand. Actually looks ready for battle like this, unlike some of the ones that are sat in the library. Again, 2 cost, 0 willpower, 2 attack, 1 defense, 2 hit points. Pretty unremarkable, but a good card to put in the dwarf deck, obviously, with all that dwarf synergy, and will trigger a lot of cards and benefit from a lot of the attachments and events we've seen so far. I then have a couple of copies of this card, which is the Dwarrowdelf Axe, which is a 1 cost attachment, nice and low again. Considering this is a triple sphere deck, we just want to make sure we've got some low cost cards in here, as many as possible. We can attach it to a dwarf character, again, pretty nice, that's allies as well, so we can put this on, make our Battle Master even more insanely overpowered. He really is getting almost on steroids here. Pretty powerful. Gets +1 attack. The response here is a little bit odd, but I say odd, I'll explain why. After attached character attacks, deal 1 damage to the defending enemy. Now, there's been a lot of talk about this. It looks like the way this works is, because in the past there's been a ruling by Fantasy Flight about the keyword after something attacks. So it looks like this means at the end of the attack phase. So that would mean after you've calculated your damage, after you've taken into consideration your defense, the defense of the enemy, and you've calculated the damage they're going to take, they then would take 1 damage after that. does change the emphasis a bit. I admit I read this at the beginning, probably like a lot of people did, to be something like similar to the Gondorian Spearman that we saw in my Eagle deck, for example, where instantly triggers. So I was playing it that you attack and you instantly do 1 damage to the enemy. Doesn't quite work like that, I don't think, if we're going to follow this precedent that we've had before. It would actually be more that after the attack phase you would then apply 1 damage, which can be useful. It means that if a character's got very high defense, they're always going to take 1 damage, but if they're constantly blocking your attacks, you're always going to be able to do 1 damage to them there. Just a minor difference. In effect, perhaps doesn't make a huge amount of difference, but there are some enemies where that order will matter. And just to vary things up, I have 2 copies of that. I also have 1 copy of the Dwarven Axe, just to vary it up. Similar sort of idea. Obviously here we've got a Dwarf Hero attachment for 2. Attached hero gains +1 attack, or +2 if it's a dwarf, and funnily enough our heroes are dwarves, so we think we'll probably get the +2 attack there. So nice card, again from the core set. Just as I say, just for variation, keep the deck interesting. I have 1 copy of that and 2 of the Darodath Axe. Okay, and time for our last card here, Veteran of Nandurin, just to finish off. I only have 1 copy of this, the cost is pretty steep, it costs 4. He has 3 attack, 2 defence. Remember that's 4 attack with Dane readied. Pretty good attacker. He does come in with 1 damage on him. Ideally you'd want to heal that, but obviously this deck can't, but he might be playing with a partner who has healing effects. Yep, just 1 copy of that. It's a card you might get out late in the game. The Battlemaster is probably a better attacker if you can power him up, but of course this is a dwarf and does benefit from the dwarf synergy in the deck. And that's it. That's the entire 50 cards that are in my dwarf deck. Very good deck for solo. I've been most quest solo with this as well. It can handle itself. Very good in multiplayer as well. Obviously if your opponent's playing dwarfs as well, they're going to be very happy because you're helping them a lot with a lot of the synergy cards there as well. Just to finish off, 1 card that I keep on standby and do sub in occasionally. A lot of people sort of don't understand, or not that they don't understand, but don't think this card's particularly good. A 0 cost event called The End Comes. Response, it lets you shuffle the encounter discard pile back into the encounter deck. Seems like a bit of an odd effect, but the reason I keep that and sometimes sub it in is some of the quests, I'm not sure this is by design, but seems to go on a bit too long because some of the things you're looking for, say objective cards in the encounter deck, end up being discarded. So I'm thinking of things like the Dead Marshes where Gollum ends up in the discard pile and you spend the next 6 hours trying to find him again. And there's no guarantee you will because he could be discarded a second time. This card sort of just helps with scenarios like that. The Red Horn Gate is the same, where you end up on the mountains being discarded and you need that 5 victory points to finish. I think perhaps tighter games testing and rules from Fantasy Flight would be preferable to this card, but as I'd rather spend more time playing the game and not 6 hours trawling through the encounter deck, I do sometimes sub this in, just perhaps 1 or 2 copies of it. I might replace the Boots Mirror Ball, just because it does have a use there. But I think that's probably why this card exists, is because the rules, perhaps for some of the quest packs, aren't as tight as they could be. Well, thanks for watching. That's the deck. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a comment and please subscribe if you want to, and I'll make another video soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.